Welcome back to U.S. Command Instant. What you are about to hear represents the single most consequential weapons transfer in the history of the modern Middle East. And the Western intelligence community missed it until it was already done. 500 Hwasong won 8 intercontinental ballistic missiles, the most advanced solid fuel ICBM that North Korea has ever produced. A weapon system that during its test launches in 2023 demonstrated a range capability exceeding 15,000 kilometers, sufficient to reach not just Israel, not just American bases across the Middle East, but the continental United States itself. 500 of them transferred in a covert logistics operation of breathtaking scale and audacity. Now, sitting in hardened underground facilities across Iranian territory, fueled, targeted, and ready. Let that number settle for a moment. 500. The United States currently deploys approximately 400 Minuteman III ICBMs in its entire land-based nuclear deterrence force. The number that Iran has just received from Pyongyang exceeds America's entire ground-based strategic nuclear delivery inventory. And unlike the Minuteman III, a system whose fixed silo locations have been known, mapped, and targeted by Russian and Chinese war planners for decades, these Hwasong-18 platforms are road mobile, they move, they hide, they can be positioned and repositioned across Iran's vast national territory in ways that make preemptive targeting effectively impossible without real-time intelligence of a quality that no satellite constellation currently provides. Israel woke up this morning in a fundamentally different strategic reality than the one it went to sleep in. The qualitative military edge that Washington has guaranteed and underwritten for half a century. The assurance that Israel will always possess weapons, systems, and delivery capabilities superior to any combination of regional adversaries has just been obliterated by a single transfer agreement between two sanctioned, isolated nations that the Western world spent decades trying to keep apart. The question that every defense ministry from Tel Aviv to Washington to Riyadh is now asking in emergency sessions is not whether this transfer happened. Satellite imagery, signals, intelligence intercepts, and human intelligence reporting from multiple independent sources have now confirmed the transfer beyond reasonable analytical doubt. The question being asked with barely concealed panic is, what happens next? What does Israel do when it faces an adversary armed with 500 ICBMs capable of carrying nuclear payloads delivered by a guidance system that no Middle Eastern missile defense architecture was designed to intercept? What does Washington do when the deterrence framework it has maintained across the region for 50 years is suddenly facing a weapons inventory that changes every calculation simultaneously? Tonight's analysis goes inside the transfer. We examine how it happened, why Western intelligence failed to stop it, what the Hwasong-18 actually represents as a weapon system, and what the strategic consequences ripple outward across Israel, the United States, and the entire global order. The world changed last night. This is what that change actually means. 3 questions will drive tonight's full analysis. First, how did North Korea and Iran execute a transfer of 500 of the world's most advanced solid fuel ICBMs without triggering a Western interdiction response? Second, what does the Hwasong-18 actual technical capability mean for Israel's defense architecture and for American power projection across the entire Middle East theater? Third, with Iran now holding the largest road mobile ICBM force outside of Russia and China, what realistic options remain for Washington and Tel Aviv? And is there any path forward that does not lead directly toward the most dangerous nuclear confrontation since the Cuban Missile Crisis? The answers are not reassuring, but they are necessary. If this channel has been giving you the analysis that cuts through the noise of official narratives and mainstream defense commentary, now is the moment to make sure you never miss an update. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone in your network who is serious about understanding what is actually happening at the sharp edge of global power competition. Drop your assessment in the comments. I want to know what you think the next move looks like from Thran, from Pyongyang, from Tel Aviv, and from a Washington that is running out of options faster than anyone in the official policy space is willing to admit publicly. The transfer, how North Korea armed Iran with the world's most dangerous ICBM. To understand how this transfer was executed without triggering a Western interdiction response, you need to understand two things simultaneously. The genuine limitations of Western intelligence collection against deeply compartmentalized operations between sanctioned states and the extraordinary lengths to which both Pyongyang and Tehran went to ensure this operation remained invisible until completion. The Hwasong-18 transfer did not happen overnight. It was the culmination of a relationship between North Korea and Iran that has been deepening steadily across the past decade, accelerating dramatically following the collapse of the JCPOA nuclear agreement in 2018 and reaching a new level of operational intimacy following the demonstrated success of North Korean artillery shell transfers to Russian forces in Ukraine, which provided Pyongyang with both hard currency and the confidence that large-scale covert weapons logistics operations could be executed successfully under Western surveillance. The logistical architecture of the transfer exploited three simultaneous vulnerabilities in Western intelligence coverage. The first vulnerability was geographic. The primary transfer route ran overland through Chinese territory, with Chinese authorities either uninformed or deliberately not looking into Central Asia. And then through a combination of Iranian-controlled corridor access and Russian transit permission into northwestern Iran. This route avoided maritime choke points where American naval interdiction assets are positioned. It avoided airspace where American surveillance assets maintain coverage. It ran through the precise geographic seam between American intelligence collection priorities. A seam that exists because no American policymaker wanted to formally task collection resources against Chinese territory at the level required to monitor this kind of ground-based logistics operation. The second vulnerability was timing. The transfer was executed in multiple phases across a 1-4 month window with individual shipments sized below the threshold that would trigger automatic escalation responses from American intelligence analysts. No single shipment was large enough to generate the alarm that the total transfer quantity would have generated if moved at once. By the time analytical fusion of the multiple shipment reports produced a complete picture of the total transfer quantity, the operation was complete. The third vulnerability was deception. North Korean and Iranian technical teams deliberately maintained normal activity patterns at known missile production and storage facilities throughout the transfer period. Satellite imagery of established facilities showed no unusual activity. The actual transfer was conducted from secondary facilities whose existence was either unknown to Western intelligence or whose activity signatures were masked by deliberate electronic deception operations. The result was that the Western intelligence community, the most heavily resourced collection and analysis apparatus in human history, missed a transfer of 500 ICBMs until the weapons were already inside. Iranian-hardened facilities dispersed across multiple locations and effectively immune to any conventional military action short of a massive sustained bombing campaign of a scale and duration that carries catastrophic escalation risk. The moment the transfer was confirmed, Emergency sessions convened simultaneously in Washington, Tel Aviv, London, and every Gulf capital, with a meaningful American military presence. What those sessions produced was not a plan. What they produced was the recognition that there is no clean plan, that every available option carries costs so severe that the decision to act requires accepting consequences that no government in the Western alliance is currently politically positioned to accept. Iran's statement following confirmation of the transfer was characteristically measured in its public language and devastating in its strategic implications. Tehran did not announce the missiles with triumphalist press conferences. It simply allowed the confirmation to propagate through intelligence channels and let the strategic implications speak for themselves. This restraint was itself a communication, a demonstration of the confidence that comes from knowing you have already achieved the objective and that nothing your adversary does now can undo it. The Hwasong-18 inside the weapon that makes every defense system obsolete. The Hwasong-18 entered the global strategic conversation in April 2023 when North Korea conducted its first public test launch under the direct observation of Kim Jong-un. What that test revealed and what Western analysts subsequently confirmed through telemetry analysis and trajectory reconstruction was a weapon system that represented a genuine generational leap in North Korean ballistic missile capability, and by extension, in the capability of any actor that came to possess it. Understanding why the Hwasong-18 is categorically different from every previous Iranian ballistic missile, and why it renders Israel's existing defense architecture functionally obsolete against this specific threat requires examining four distinct technical dimensions: propulsion range, guidance, and survivability. The propulsion system is where the Hwasong-18 story begins. Previous North Korean ICBMs, and by extension, the Iranian long-range ballistic systems derived from North Korean technology transfers use liquid fuel propulsion. Liquid fuel systems are operationally significant in their capability, but they carry a critical tactical limitation. They require a fueling sequence before launch that takes hours and generates observable thermal and chemical signatures that intelligence satellites and ground-based sensors can detect. This launch preparation window is the vulnerability that American and Israeli preemptive strike doctrine has historically targeted. If you can detect the fueling sequence, you can strike the missile before it launches. The Hwasong-18 eliminates this vulnerability entirely. It uses a three-stage solid fuel propulsion system, the most advanced solid fuel ICBM propulsion architecture that North Korea has ever produced. A solid fuel missile requires no fueling sequence. The propellant is already loaded and stored within the missile body. A road mobile 18 launcher can receive a launch order, erect its missile, and execute a launch within minutes, generating a thermal signature only in the seconds before ignition, far too brief for any preemptive response. This is not a marginal improvement in survivability. It is a categorical transformation against a liquid fuel system. Preemptive strike remains a viable, if difficult and risky option against a solid fuel road mobile system dispersed across Iranian territory. Preemptive strike is not a viable option. You cannot target what you cannot find with sufficient advance notice to strike before launch. The range dimension compounds the threat in ways that reshape the entire regional strategic map. The Hwasong-18 demonstrated range confirmed at over 15,000 kilometers in its maximum trajectory. Test configuration means that from launch positions anywhere within Iranian territory, the weapon can reach Tel Aviv, every American base in the Middle East, every European NATO capital, and with optimal positioning targets within the continental United States. Iran has never previously possessed a delivery system with intercontinental reach. The acquisition of 500 Hwasong-18 platforms transforms Iran from a regional military power into a state with genuine global strike capability overnight. The guidance system represents the third dimension of the Hwasong-18's threat profile and the dimension that most directly undermines existing missile defense architectures. North Korea's guidance technology has advanced substantially across the past decade, driven by access to Russian and Chinese technical expertise and by the kind of forced indigenous innovation that comprehensive sanctions pressure generates. The Hwasong-18 uses an inertial navigation system updated by stellar navigation, a guidance approach that is entirely independent of GPS or any other satellite navigation system that can be jammed or spoofed by American electronic warfare assets. This guidance independence means that American GPS jamming operations, which have been running continuously across the Middle East for extended periods and which have contributed to degrading the accuracy of some Iranian missile systems, have zero effect on 18 terminal accuracy. The weapon navigates by stars. Stars cannot be jammed. Terminal accuracy for the Hwasong-18 based on North Korean test data analysis is estimated at a circular error probable of approximately 100 to 150 m for conventional warhead configurations with substantially improved accuracy achievable through terminal guidance updates against hardened military targets. This accuracy, combined with an appropriate warhead yield, produces reliable destruction against city-scale targets. The accuracy is irrelevant. The weapon reaches its designated area regardless. The survivability architecture of the Hwasong-18 addresses the final dimension of the threat. The missile is equipped with a maneuvering re-entry vehicle, a warhead that can execute evasive maneuvers during terminal descent, drastically complicating intercept solutions for any missile defense system attempting to engage it. The Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, THAAD, which the United States has deployed in the region and which represents the highest tier intercept capability available against ballistic threats, was designed and optimized against non-maneuvering re-entry vehicles following predictable ballistic trajectories. Against a maneuvering re-entry vehicle executing lateral displacement maneuvers at hypersonic velocity in the terminal phase, THAAD's intercept probability degrades sharply. The Arrow 3 system, Israel's highest tier ballistic missile defense platform, designed for exopheric intercept of long-range ballistic threats, faces the same fundamental challenge. Its intercept algorithms were developed against trajectory profiles that the Hwasong-18 maneuvering re-entry vehicle does not follow. Now multiply these technical characteristics by 500. 500 road mobile launchers dispersed across Iranian territory, each carrying a weapon that cannot be preemptively targeted, cannot be effectively jammed, and cannot be reliably intercepted by any defense system currently deployed in the region. This is not a threat that can be addressed through incremental improvements to existing defense architecture. It is a threat that requires a fundamental rethinking of every assumption that Israeli and American strategic planning has been built upon. The nuclear dimension, which Iranian officials have neither confirmed nor denied in their public statements regarding the transfer, adds a layer of uncertainty that is itself strategically significant. The Hwasong-18 was designed as a nuclear delivery vehicle. Its payload capacity and re-entry vehicle configuration are optimized for nuclear warhead delivery. Whether the transferred missiles carry nuclear warheads, carry conventional warheads, or transferred as delivery platforms awaiting warhead mating, the ambiguity itself constitutes a deterrence effect. Any Israeli or American military planner faced with the possibility that incoming Hwasong-18 missiles could carry either nuclear or conventional payloads is forced into the payload's most dangerous assumption. Every launch must be treated as nuclear until proven otherwise. That single uncertainty transforms the entire decision-making framework. Strategic ambiguity, deliberately maintained, is not a weakness. It is one of the most powerful instruments of deterrence a state can possess. If Iran were to acquire even a limited number of such systems, it would fundamentally alter the psychological and strategic balance across the region. What follows in Washington is not confusion. It is paralysis born from clarity. In the emergency sessions of the National Security Council, the issue is not a lack of options. It is that every option carries consequences potentially worse than inaction. This is what a true strategic dilemma looks like. Not a failure to decide, but the recognition that all decisions lead toward escalation. Consider the options matrix. A direct military strike against Iranian missile infrastructure appears, at first glance, to be the most decisive course of action. Destroy the capability before it can be used. This has been the backbone of preemptive doctrine for decades. But the reality is far more complex. Mobile missile systems are not fixed targets. Even a relatively small number of road mobile launchers dispersed across vast terrain creates a targeting problem that cannot be solved with a single strike package. A campaign designed to significantly degrade such a force would require sustained, large-scale operations over time, not a strike, but a war. And a war with Iran does not remain contained. It expands across the region, threatening maritime choke points, activating proxy networks, and exposing U.S. forces and allies to retaliatory strikes. Covert action presents a more subtle alternative. Historically, operations against Iranian nuclear and missile programs, cyber intrusions, sabotage, targeted disruptions have achieved measurable success. But covert action operates on a different timeline. It is slow, incremental, and uncertain. It may degrade capability over years, but it does not resolve the immediate strategic reality. Deterrence, once established, exists in the present, not in the future. Diplomatic pressure and sanctions, meanwhile, face a fundamental contradiction. If a state acquires advanced deterrent capability specifically to prevent external coercion, it is unlikely to relinquish that capability in response to the very pressure it was designed to neutralize. The logic is circular. The stronger the deterrent, the weaker the leverage of sanctions. Missile defense appears politically attractive because it signals action without immediate escalation. Systems like THAAD and Arrow 3 provide critical layers of protection. But even the most advanced defense architecture faces limits, particularly against mobile solid fuel systems equipped with maneuverable reentry vehicles. The challenge is not interception of a single missile. It is saturation. Defense systems can mitigate risk, but they cannot eliminate it entirely, and they introduce a cost asymmetry. Interceptors are expensive and finite, while offensive systems can often be produced more cheaply and in greater numbers. This leaves negotiation an option rarely acknowledged publicly, but always present in serious strategic thinking. The difficulty is not technical, it is political. Negotiation would require recognizing a new deterrence reality, and that recognition carries domestic and international costs. It risks being interpreted as acceptance, even if it is, in fact, a pragmatic attempt to stabilize a volatile situation. This is the source of Washington's paralysis. Not weakness, but constraint. Not indecision, but the absence of a clean path forward. For Israel, the implications are even more immediate. For decades, Israeli strategic doctrine has rested implicitly on the concept often referred to as the Samson option, the assurance that in the face of existential threat, Israel retains the capacity for overwhelming retaliation. That doctrine has functioned as a final layer of deterrence, rarely discussed but always understood. The emergence of a credible peer-level missile threat, particularly one with potential nuclear ambiguity, complicates that framework. Deterrence depends on certainty, the belief that retaliation will outweigh any conceivable gain. But when both sides possess survivable second strike capabilities, the equation shifts toward mutual vulnerability. The logic of deterrence does not disappear, but it becomes more fragile, more dependent on perception, timing, and restraint. Operationally, Israel's response would be immediate and comprehensive. Heightened alert levels, continuous readiness across missile defense systems, dispersion of strategic assets, and reinforcement of command and control infrastructure. These measures increase survivability and response capacity. They do not, by themselves, resolve the underlying strategic tension. The psychological dimension is equally significant. Missile defense systems like Iron Dome were designed to manage persistent, lower-tier threats. The perception of vulnerability changes when the threat shifts to long-range, high-impact systems. Public confidence becomes harder to sustain, and economic signals, currency fluctuations, market volatility, investment hesitation begin to reflect that uncertainty. Stepping back, the broader implications extend beyond any single country. The global non-proliferation framework has always depended on a combination of deterrence, diplomacy, and enforcement. Its strength lies not only in rules, but in the belief that those rules can be upheld. If that belief erodes, if states conclude that advanced capabilities can be developed or transferred despite sustained pressure, the incentive structure shifts. More actors begin to reassess the balance between restraint and capability. This does not guarantee proliferation, but it increases its probability. Major powers will interpret such a shift through their own strategic lenses. For Russia, it may represent an opportunity to redirect Western focus. For China, it becomes a data point in assessing U.S. resolve and crisis management under pressure. For regional actors, particularly in the Gulf, it raises immediate questions about security guarantees and long-term alignment. What emerges is not a single crisis, but a transition. The existing order does not collapse overnight, but it becomes less stable, more contested, more uncertain. And in that environment, the most critical variable is not technology alone. It is decision-making under pressure, clarity of judgment, discipline in escalation control, the ability to recognize when strength lies not in immediate action, but in managing risk over time. Because in scenarios like this, the greatest danger is not intention, it is miscalculation.